All right, y'all. We have we are highlighting our special guest. Let me repeat. He comes from the best high school in America, Dub C, West Charlotte. That's right. But that's not important right now. I would like to introduce our special guest again, Brandon Risher. He is a clinical psychologist of the Risher Counseling and Wellness. Just want to kind of kick this off by saying, what got you started in being a clinical psychologist, and what was your path in doing so?
Well, as you know, Jamal, I mean, I'm a Charlatan. Yep. I thought I was going to be a physician all of my life. Started an internship in high school and realized that I did not want to do the work of a doctor, but I was very interested in the stories that the patients were saying. And I never knew a Black psychologist. I mean, I knew the term, but I never knew anyone. I didn't have any role models or anything. Mm-hmm. So I figured I would go into psychiatry and started at Morehouse College and realized I didn't want to prescribe medication, but I was still interested in the stories. And I felt that particularly with our unique plight as Black people and the intergenerational trauma that we experience through slavery, through Jim Crow and everything like that, I wanted to be able to use my gifts and skills of me being able to think about the world a little bit differently to help my people. And that's really where it really started.
Okay. All right, this is up.
Let me. I want to ask you this as well. In the Black community, as far as our mental health is concerned, as a Black society, mm-hmm. is it largely still taboo for us? Do you feel like it's kind of like one of those things where like, man, Jesus will take care of it. Like is it not discussed enough in the Black community, basically?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look back to slavery, that really is as far as you were going to go was to survive, mm-hmm. right? I mean, if you think about even Good Times, right? Even the song gets right, scratching and surviving. It's not thriving, right? Surviving. And therapy is about thriving. It is not about surviving. It is about making yourself better. And so many people institutionally have been taught to simply survive. So then the concept of therapy and being vulnerable so that you can grow beyond just survival is something that a lot of people don't really understand. And then also airing your dirty laundry and having that information used and it being weaponized against you is something that a lot of people are kind of concerned about. So you have those confluence of things, and it creates the perpetuation of it being taboo.
So let me ask you a question. So how do you fight the stigmatism that seeking help is a white person thing?
Well, I think first and foremost, you just got to have faces that look like you, mm-hmm. right? I mean, fortunately, I've been pretty successful because a lot of times people assume that I can understand their experience because I am Black and mm-hmm. that I can understand the plight of the Black experience, right? There is some validity to that, but what I also say is, but I don't understand your experience specifically, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of racism as far as like color and stuff like that, gotcha. And being light skinned and mm-hmm. all this other stuff that kind of comes with that. So it is something that you need more people of color, right? So mm-hmm. like I'm an anomaly. I am a man, I'm young, and I'm Black. Mm-hmm. There are very few people like me in my field in Charlotte, unfortunately, right? Yeah. I can only see who I can see, right? I can only see 35, maybe 40 patients if I'm pushing it a week. We have 1.5 million people in the area, right? So we need more people like us. I think now then with that though, you also need the requisite gifts and skills because you can come to me because I'm Black, but you're not going to pay me continuously because I'm Black. Right? Good point. So you still have to build that rapport. Yeah. You still have to be able to make people feel comfortable, and also you have to be able to deliver something.
Yep.
Sorry. No, please.
Well, you mentioned gifts and skills. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people that whenever they want to get into psychiatry or any of the fields, they say, "I'm good with talking to people." Mm-hmm. How does that work with actually getting into the field? There's a lot of people who come into the field who believe that they're good at giving advice, they're good at listening. Are those types typically successful or no?
Advice giving is not something you really do in therapy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It is really guiding people to make the best decision for themselves. Because if you're giving advice, essentially what you're saying, you have disciples, basically, is that I think about the world this way. If you think about the world this way, then you'll be fine, right? And that's an exercise in your own ego. It is really about being able to help people guide based on their particular experiences and not just being able to have advice, but understanding how that advice can be utilized. Because I can give you some really, really good advice that in a vacuum, if you followed it to the letter, you will be fine. But what is that going to do with your parents and your siblings and your girl or your man or whomever it is? Because they also are going to have to change too. Some people think that therapy is this, that everybody around is just waiting for you to get better. And they're prepared for you to be better. And it's like, oh, I just can't wait. And then you get better and it's like, oh, great. Now we just go on as a family.
Right.
If you've never been quote unquote okay, right? Your family has adjusted to that for better or for worse. And now you're fundamentally changing the game. And then everybody else, there's a chain reaction that comes with that. And that's why advice giving is a piece of it, but it's very rare that I actually do that, because you got to figure out how this thing actually plays out in real life. So there's a difference between, in my field, efficacy and effectiveness. And efficacy is what works in the lab, right? And then effectiveness is what works out in the real world, right? And what you're really trying to do is reconcile the two. How do I get something in the lab first, but also how to translate it in a way that goes for your career and your relationships?
And can you speak to the importance of doing the work? I hear therapists say that a lot. People have to do the work. And can you speak to the importance of doing so and what that really means?
So doing the work is really about the concept of growth, right? It's having a growth mindset, which I think is one of these buzzwords today, which is some therapists can really get seduced by you just basically dropping jewels on people. Like, oh man, I never thought about it like that before. And it becomes what I call sitcom therapy. You do your work, you wrap it up, it sounds great, and then you say, oh, well, what did we talk about last week? I have no idea. Right? And now they're coming because they're coming to hear your voice, but not coming to do the work. So about doing the work is, I have to do something that's really difficult. I have to have some conversations. I have to have some insight about myself, about, you know what, maybe the way I think about women is not just about my dad, but it's about society. It's about rap music. It's about my grandfather. It's about me in a weird, perverse way, respecting my father, who was an abuser, and pitying my mom that I conflated with love. And I have to be able to reconcile those two things, so that when I go forward and I don't want to treat my wife that way, so I don't physically abuse her, but I emotionally abuse her. And I say, well, at least I'm better than my dad. That's supposed to say, but why am I, what's the premise of abuse altogether? Right. So doing the work is really understanding, like, you see what you can see, right? So when something grows, like if you think about a tree, the roots have to grow in concert with the trunk, right? Otherwise, it can't hold its weight. Right, so people are always trying to, flower the plant or make the plant look pretty without necessarily, tilling the soil and making sure that the roots, the foundational things of somebody is set, right? And or another thing that I'll say is some people try to build a house from the roof down, and you can't do that. So doing the work is but understanding what the foundations are. I think we understand that it exists, but not necessarily understanding the building material in order to say, okay, should this land or should this foundation be there, right? Like when I work with a lot of couples, they're trying to get themselves back to something that actually they never were, right? So they're they're trying to build something. Well, we want to be romantic. Were you ever? Or was this a business transaction? I'll trade your safety and security and I'll give you my beauty, right? And then you're in a relationship and you're like, oh, but I want more. And it's like, but we never had that to begin with. Right? So now we're trying to create something that never existed, and I cannot create something independent of the other person.
I just thought about something, because you mentioned to us off camera that you use a lot of music analogies and sports analogies.
Absolutely.
I just thought of a sports analogy. We are obviously a sports podcast. Everybody complains about the Hornets every time. We are all in abusive relationships with the Charlotte Hornets. All of us have been abused for years and years and years. But a sports analogy to that is the Hornets foundation has never been straight, which speaks to the struggles of the franchise. We've never drafted well, which is the foundation. You have that foundation, you can grow, you can build something. But if your foundation is crooked, where does that leave you?
Correct.
My sports analogy for the day.
There you go.
And Kimmel Walker was the bones. He's going now.
He's going now.
The youth is the foundation, and we're building that foundation.
That's it. So, that's it.
But I got a question. Sure. You said that on average you're talking to about 30 to 40 people per week, right? So I don't talk to that many people that have that many problems week in and week out. So when you're constantly talking to all these couples and all these people, how do you compartmentalize that when you clock out for the day, and where's your happy place?
I mean, it's really about finding a routine. What I do inherently is anxiety provoking. I have no idea what somebody's going to bring me when they walk into my office. Absolutely no idea.
Is that kind of the fun part, for lack of a better term?
It is, because you're figuring it out. Like when I do public speaking, it is me. I control the narrative, right? In therapy, it is not about me. I don't have bad days because it ain't my day. Right? It's their day. Right? I have to make every patient feel like I'm the only one they're seeing, while at the same time them also understanding that in an hour I got somebody else to see. Right? So you're trying to fit that. So a lot of what I try to do is routines. I exercise quite a bit. I talk to people who are not in the field. Right? That's really, really important, because they can just see the world differently than I do. Right? You know, you can always get kind of caught up in the way, you know, into your own press clippings about, oh, I did this, or I did that, or I did that. But it's really, I mean, I like a lot of comedy. I love music. So I'm really just trying to find things that are routine that kind of lets me, like, you don't totally compartmentalize it. You're just going to have some patients that they just stick with you, right? Yeah. For better or for worse. And you don't try to avoid it. You try to absorb it and let it kind of flow through you. But it's really a lot of, actually, the more money I make, the more I travel, because I need to get away. Yeah. Physically being away. Understood. You know, I say that, you know, peace of mind costs as you make more money. So being able to say, you know what, I have to really invest in myself, because when I know when I'm at my best, I'm phenomenal. When I'm okay, I'm a good therapist. But when I'm at my best, and that's what my patients pay for. They pay for me to be at my best. So I have to continue to do that as much as I can. It
just reminded me of something, and not to make this about me, but it literally just kind of popped. It gave me a memory that just popped up in my brain. When my mother passed away, it'll be 4 years next month. When my mother first passed away, I was traveling like crazy. I went everywhere. Every vacation I could afford, I went somewhere. And it was, you know, the grief, the stress, whatever you want to call it. That was my happy place. That was me. I don't know what it was, me running away from the pain. Whatever it was my way of dealing with whatever was going on with my mother's death. Not to equate my mother's death with your profession, but I'm just saying that I did. But the experience of just needing to physically get away from the place that's causing you the anxiety, the stress, whatever that may be, is something that just kind of I related to when you said that. Yeah.
And actually, paradoxically, the more people I see, the easier it is, because I don't get to dwell.
Okay.
Right? When I was seeing 2 or 3 people a day when I first started, it was very easy to, I should have said this, I could have done this. And you're just constantly, but I walk out, my patient leaves my office, I go to the bathroom, and when I'm coming back, it's next one up.
So having more patients has, quote unquote, made you a better psychiatrist, would you say?
It's made me a better person outside of it, because I don't have the opportunity to dwell on any one person. Okay. Right? So, I mean, obviously there are going to be instances where if it's like a death in the family or, you know, infidelity or something like that, when it's like really like, you know, but for the most part, I got to be ready. Yeah. Gotcha. Right? And I think that's what experience really gives you. And I couldn't have that year one.
Now, have you ever, or do you ever get a patient or patients who try and take y'all's professional relationship outside of the office?
Yes. There's a concept called transference. Where they may see you. It happens. I mean, it happens every now and again. And as you get better, you get better at kind of sniffing that out from the beginning, and saying, "Are you here for me? Or are you here for the work?" Right? Because ultimately, they don't really know what you're going to do. And most of my patients now are referrals from other patients. Okay. Right, which is great. You know, so you know the patients are kind of marketing for you. But yeah, there are opportunities. There are definitely times where, you know, and what's interesting is that you would think about it sometimes with women, right? Mm-hmm. But it's actually with men too. Yeah. You know, that you might be the friend. In couples work, I might be like the good husband. Right? Oh man, if you only listen to me like he does, we would be fine, right? And I also say, but I don't have to go home with you either, right? The stakes are different. So yeah, there are definitely opportunities where that occurs. And any good therapist, you know, is going to have those situations where, because, you know, we are empathetic, we are listening. Our job is to be a listening, empathetic ear for the purposes of helping you. So I think that in some ways that can be conflated in some people's minds as something else.
I'm gonna let you go right after this, right?
Okay.
I wanted to ask this question. Like, this crew, we discussed the recent spike in crime in Charlotte, and specifically, we were all saying that with most of these cases, these are young people. Like, in most of there's like almost 60 murders in Charlotte already now, and most of those cases are like young people between like 16 and 21. I spoke to the fact of like, what I believe is the root cause is like, nobody wakes up and say, I just want to be a violent person who goes out and kills somebody. So I always said that the root cause for that was like emotional trauma and emotional distress. Do you feel like that's tied in with, violence with young people? Is there some type, is there a correlation between emotional distress, anger, stress, anxiety that kind of exudes violence?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a multitude of things. So I think you have people who are young, and young people are really emotionally driven people, right? Right. Logic tends to come over time because you need experience to really have nuance.
To get that perspective,
right? Yeah. If I buy a gun, I can quote unquote buy respect, right? And I think a lot of particularly younger people who are disenfranchised just want respect.
Yeah.
Now, respect. Now, if respect is anything, I always say this in my work: you will get what you want, but at what cost, right? So, if validation or respect is something you want that bad, you will do anything to get it, right? If I haven't eaten in 3 days, I don't mind robbing a grocery store, right? Because my desire to eat is so valuable to my survival. So, imagine respect is that for you. That it is just as important as eating, drinking, and sleeping. Right? Then you will do what's necessary. So if I can walk around with a pseudo level of respect on my hip and somebody disrespects me, and I mean, I think that's something that you hear really more with black people than anything else. I'm tired of being disrespected and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, but you don't really understand what respect means. Then, and if I want to exert some power and control without having context to what I'm seeking, right? Power and control is a vehicle, not a destination. But people see it as a destination. So if you're disrespecting me, then you basically stop me from getting to my destination, and I'm going to get rid of you in order to do that. So I think you have those confluence of things. I think you also have gentrification.
We spoke to that too.
That talks about that, which is it's a competition model of racism where it's finite amount of resources. You have fewer space. You have less space and more people in a concentrated area,
which creates anxiety,
and depression and anger and things like that. So you have those confluence of things, and I think you'll get these spikes. And I don't think, as long as gentrification occurs, whether it's on Freedom Drive or Ashley Road or something like that, any gateway street where you can see uptown clear, I think this is going to be a continuing trend. And the problem is that they criminalize the population, and again, they're treating the symptom and not the root causes of why this is the case. And essentially what's happening is that any successful institution just reappropriates their values for what that generation particularly values. So for example, gentrification is basically just younger white people saying this: I want to be rich, but I also value the environment. So if I can close the gap between my work and my home, then I felt that I did the noble thing, which is I did something good for the environment.
But in the process,
but at the cost of black people, right?
In the process.
So my $1 million home may not be as big as my parents', but it's still the $1 million home, and I get to ride the train uptown, but at the expense of black people, right? So y'all get out the paint. Appreciate you. And we're not going to push you to the suburbs because you can't afford to go. So now you're going to have an apartment that can house 3 people. Now you got 7 people in it.
Yeah. They're all fighting for respect.
Right. Exactly.
That they don't understand.
So, what would you describe as barriers to African Americans receiving help in our community?
So a few things. Number one, understanding that you need it, right? Just on a very basic level, understanding why you need it and where your help can actually add value to your life. So I'll use a relationship as an analogy. If I want a relationship to purely curb my loneliness, well, once I'm in it, I'm not lonely anymore. Then what? Now, all the requisite things of a relationship are still there, and I'm still going to have to behave. And the only reason I'm continuing to do more and more is to have the same result that I got rid of a long time ago. No. I need a relationship to help me grow. It's a platform to help me be better as an individual and as a collective, as opposed to just simply curbing something that I feel that I have a deficit in.
Gotcha.
And Black people are really deficit driven, right? We have these deficits, and I want the deficit to be closed. I'm like, okay, so that what? What do you want to do with that, right? If I give you a house, if I give you wealth, I think Kamala Harris has this $100 billion plan for housing. I'm like, that's utterly ridiculous, because the reason that houses are valuable is because they're scarce.
Yep.
Right? So now you have all Black people have money, now it's not as valuable, and then the wealth is gone. Right? It's
inflation.
Again, right. It's really understanding exactly what you need. So what I try to do as a therapist and as a speaker is to say, you have to first understand exactly what you're wanting to do. First and foremost, if you will not grow, you will feel pain. If you grow, you will feel pain. But the pain can be more productive or more of a static pain. And if we are, whether it's drugs or something like that, drugs are there to curb pain, right? Heroin is the hero's drug. It's a painkiller. It's a pain number, right? So for so long, so many people were taking drugs to curb pain without understanding that the pain is necessary for growth. Pain is a teacher.
I didn't mean to cut you off,
Sure.
but something else that just popped up in my brain. There was an episode of The Breakfast Club where Taraji P. Henson was on The Breakfast Club, and she's been heavily campaigning about just mental wellness, mental health with Black folks. And a point she made was, and this is speaking to what you just said, if we go injure our leg, injure our foot, our ankle, what do? We go to the doctor.
Right.
We injure anything else in our body, we go to the doctor. Our head is a part of our body, but we're not so quick to go to the doctor when it's something going on with our head. Of course, I'm figuratively speaking, but you get what I'm saying. And to speak to your point about having to go through pain to get to your ultimate goal, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the therapist, obviously, but you have to kind of go to that dark space sometime. You have to go to that pain. You have to confront that pain. That hurts. It's going to hurt like hell sometimes. If you don't do that, you ultimately don't make yourself well. Is that accurate? Does that fall in line with what you just said, basically?
So mental health, like anything, being healthy is not the absence of getting sick. It's just not, right? You have to, any healthy person gets sick from time to time, and you build immunity through getting sick. Right? So, but some people are so afraid of ever getting sick or ever feeling pain that they do everything to avoid it, but at the cost of growth. So mental health and mental wellness or mental illness, they're all aspects of the same thing. And it's like, yes, you do get sick. There should be times where you should be quote unquote sick, right? Your mother died.
Right.
Wow, wasn't expecting that. That's tough. I'm going to struggle. I should. What if you didn't?
Right.
What would that say to your relationship with her? If you were like, I'm good. Right. So, but people feel that if I go through this somehow, then something's wrong with me. And I'm like, no, something's wrong with you because you don't go through it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the third law of thermodynamics, right? That energy is neither created nor destroyed; it's just transferred. Right? So you're going to transfer it into something. You're going to transfer it into food. You're going to transfer it into drugs. You're going to transfer it into sex. You're going to transfer it into any level of validation that you seek, as opposed to just addressing it. When you have the flu, most doctors say, go have the flu. You'll get over it. Oh, man, but I'm hot and cold and I have a headache and I'm stuffy. It's like, yeah, you have the flu. You're supposed to go through that. Now go through it, and in a few days you'll feel better. And man, when you feel better, does it feel great?
Awesome.
Right?
So, I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, just a kind of caveat off your comment about when there's an unexpected tragedy, how you respond to it. Going back to the Nipsey Hussle death, I don't know if you watched the BET Award show, but his mom gave a speech on the show. I went back and watched it in hindsight, but it got a lot of conversation because there were a lot of people that were saying that she was mourning. Some other people said that something was wrong with her because they did not feel that understand is probably the better word.
Yeah.
But they did not feel that she was mourning the way that they felt like that she should have. With you being a therapist, and I don't know if you saw any of this.
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, essentially, she showed little to no remorse or any emotion whatsoever. And just like you say, energy isn't created or destroyed. It just moves on to another form. That's essentially what she said about Nipsey Hussle. Mm-hmm. So that being the case, if somebody walks into your office who just lost somebody who supposedly close to them, if they come in pretty stoic, how do you respond to that as a therapist? Do you reinforce that and just kind of guide them as how to deal with it, or do you try and tell them that maybe they should be a little bit more emotional? Mm-hmm. How do you handle that?
Well, it depends if them being stoic is at the expense of something else, right? So relationships with people are way more nuanced than the public will ever understand, right? That when Nipsey Hussle died, he became an entity. Mm-hmm. Because you can't grow, you can't do anything more, right? So he was more a representation of a whole group of people who felt connected to him in some way. We have no idea what his mother's relationship was to Nipsey, right? She just could be in shock, right? Because it's not like she gets to grieve in private. I mean, I have some personal experience with this, with my grandmother, dying in a public fashion. You don't get to grieve in private only, right? You have to grieve in public. And you just can't look like you're broken down every single moment, because you're like, I gotta live, man. Like I gotta be all the things that people need me to be, and I gotta grieve.
Right.
And who knows who and to whom she's being strong for. Right. She's like, hey, I'm at the BET Awards. I'm supposed to cry? No, they're asking me to do something.
Yeah.
Let me do this. So when something is so personal, to tell someone how to grieve is saying that you should, again, it would be like me giving advice. It's telling you what to be versus saying, well, let's understand why you are the way you are.
Okay.
Right? Because you understand that first, so that if I don't have a baseline understanding of the relationship with someone, I cannot help them. What I can do is give them advice based on how I would do it, but it's never about them. It's about me.
Right. So speaking on your grandmother in Charleston incident, I'm a Charleston native. I felt some type of things, and I've been in that church. My grandmother.
Let me cut you off real quick. I just feel like, and I'm gonna be real quick, I just feel like it's necessary to kind of introduce to the audience. Your grandmother was unfortunately one of the 9 people who were a victim in the Charleston 9 shooting. So I just to give context to what the conversation, to where the conversation is going. But Rodney, go ahead. I just wanted to.
I'm a Charleston native myself. I've been in that church. My great grandmother was a member. She died in 2008. So how did you, as a therapist, licensed therapist, grieve that? Like, did you seek help yourself? Did you lean on your family? How did you handle that?
So to answer your question, yes to all of those things. So grief in any context is multi-layered, mm-hmm. right? I'm grieving the death of my grandmother. I'm dealing with the death of my mother's mother. I am, in all the collateral things, the public nature of it, why it happened, the circumstances. And, most people who die don't really understand exactly the circumstances of why somebody killed another person. Yeah. I actually do, right? So there's multi-layers to it. One thing that I knew, I had a great support system mm-hmm. from the very beginning. And I remember telling them, I'm going to really have to lean on you. Mm-hmm. So I made that known very early, right? I didn't try to do it by myself. Mm-hmm. This was beyond, a trauma is something that occurs that is beyond one's ability to cope. Yep. And that was way beyond my ability to cope. So I wasn't going to try. Mm-hmm. So I had a great support system at work. I had a great support system of friends who would check on me. And not just ask me, am I okay, but asking me, how am I doing? Mm-hmm. Right? Because when you ask me, am I okay, now I either have to confirm or deny what you want me to say versus saying, well, how are you feeling? And I would, if I had a bad day, I had a bad day. Say, I'm having a really, really bad day. So I really try to channel the energy as much as I could into doing things with people, more mm-hmm. so than anything. The thing I wanted to do, which was to lock myself in a room, was the thing I knew I couldn't do. Mm-hmm. or shouldn't do for my own personal growth. So I actually had to really take the risk of doing things that I really did not want to do. And at the same time, if I just absolutely couldn't deal with people, giving myself freedom and license to say, I don't have it today, I need you to leave me alone.
Gotcha.
So now, were you in practice when that happened? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you continue to go to work during that time? So how were you able to, I guess, compartmentalize both worlds, grieving while trying to help others through their struggles?
So my work for me is my
outlet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just different, right? To be in a, because again, like I said earlier, it's not about me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for that time, I could be in other people's worlds, right? It was like I had this like background running out always that was sapping my energy that I really felt after work. Right at the time, my girlfriend, like she probably got more of it than my patients ever did. Because I could focus and I could say, you know what, I can do the noble thing, I could do the good thing, I can help people, and I would come home and I fall apart. I was so mentally exhausted, but in the moment I could handle it. But and looking back at it, I probably should have taken more time for myself. I probably should have traveled more. I probably should have done some of the things to kind of compartmentalize what was going on. But my work was my happy place. My work was the place where I could escape being me. I was not Brandon Risher, the grandson of Ethel Lance and the cousin of Susie Jackson and Tawanza Sanders. I was a therapist and people were coming to hear what I had to say and for me to help them. And that gave me some solace because I was thinking maybe if somebody did that to Dylan Roof, maybe he wouldn't have done that. Yeah. Right? So that was something that I could always think about, that maybe I am preventing someone from being able to take that next step.
And that sounds like a really big step to take, to say, hey man, you know, there's always cause and effect. Nobody wakes up and just says, I'm going to be a cold, heartless killer. Something had to happen to this person to cause whatever this happened. Do you agree with that?
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
I mean, when I was at the trial, I could, I remember saying to people, like, I can absolutely see how somebody could get there.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I've always had that way of thinking because I have this weird, this is just me, I have this weird fascination with like criminology because I always want to know what happened to this person to get them to be the way they are.
Sure.
If you go research any serial killer, I guarantee you 90% of the time, it's always abusive relationship. It's always childhood trauma. There's always cause and effect. And that's kind of what brought me to, when you were stating what you were stating, that just kind of led me to state that. I just kind of want to know, was that off base or not? So,
No,
yeah.
Sure. So going back to the Civil War, right? So I'm going to go back from there and bring it back. We as Black people, our stories get better, right? Each generation, our story gets better. For him, his story gets worse in his mind, right? Their grandfathers and great grandfathers talking about how great they had it then. You know, how Black people had their place and they would never dare touch a white woman, and all these other things. And he's like, yo, why?
Why are we here? Right. Why are we here?
Right.
Right.
So you have these confluence of things. You have some inherent built-in mental illness, and you have this kind of Molotov cocktail of all these things are occurring.
I was just about to say it's like a bomb waiting to go off.
And so to say, I don't have the same ability. This white girl I like a Black dude, and why would she go backwards? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think people, a lot of times when it talks about interracial relationships, people are going to say that, and that's why their families get so pissed. Why would you inherently date somebody that's worse than you?
Like a lesser human.
Right. Yeah. So, but I can also get my mind to say, oh, well, she's not willingly, she's being forced. And I'm going to be
the liberator.
Right, exactly. So, wow. I mean,
that's powerful.
If you want to understand where someone is going through, it's like, just try. It might be some fiction, right? It might be, you have to be creative. But what he did wasn't inherently logical. So what he did was create something that wasn't based on logic, but was based on his conceptualization of what he was seeing and what he was feeling in the stories that he had been told generationally.
Now, you got something?
No, go ahead, bro.
Okay, I want to pivot it to in another direction.
Sure.
You kind of brought up the African American struggle from the Civil War up until now. I listened to one of your podcasts before coming here today, and you spoke about how a lot of African Americans choose not to go to therapy because of the stigma of pricing. So what I want you to do for those that are listening and watching, kind of explain what the stigma is, what the truths are, and some of the many different ways they can go about getting counseling in regards to insurance or maybe through their work, anything like that.
Sure. So I'll speak about me personally because I think it'll help. So I take Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, and CBHA, which is a behavioral wing of like MetCost for CMC. And I'm out on network with certain people, which means that you pay me a full price and I hand you a receipt and you might be able to get reimbursed, more likely reimbursed through your insurance company. So it is not like medicine, right? In my field, the diagnosis is the beginning, not the end, right? In medicine, it's the end, okay? You have type 2 diabetes, you know exactly what to do. You follow this protocol and you'll be fine. In my field, it's like, okay, but depression looks different in each individual, right? And there's so many correlates to it. Now, I have some people who pay a deductible, right, which is $100 or $120, and some people pay out of pocket, or some people pay $10 for their copay. And it's really about what you pay for what you value. Right, so this goes institutionally. If you don't inherently value the institution of therapy, you cannot value an individual therapist, right? It's just hard to do so.
Yeah, right.
So you really have to see the value in it, and that's where. And this is something that I understand as a Black therapist, is that I gotta hit hard fast.
Yeah,
I gotta come and hit you with something, be like, I'm willing to spend that money on this, right? Because if you don't, then people are like, I paid you how much for what? And I feel, matter of fact, I feel worse. Oh yeah, I'm not doing that. You want to do this every week or twice a week, or depending on. So as a therapist, at the beginning, you're part salesperson, right? There's not a lot of therapy per se, because a session does not make therapy. Like I'll have sometimes, actually I have a wife that called me and said, I would like to come in for a session. And I said, for what? Like, well, I want to come in because I want to talk about my husband. I was like, no, because what you're going to tell me might help me move the needle for him, but it won't move the needle for the two of you, right? Because there's so much I need to know about you that you can't give me in a session. So a session doesn't make therapy. So it's really about the commitment to it's like a gym membership, anything like that. If you don't value going to the gym, you're gonna feel like it's a waste of money, right? But that's something that I can't give you. I can help illuminate in you, but I can't give it to you. So, and it is indefinite. I have a patient I've seen for 6 years. Some people I see for 2 months. I'm like, you got it. So it just really depends. So it's how much of the work are you doing on your own to begin with, and going back to the work you're doing in between the times we meet is really going to really dictate how well you do and how much you're going to have to invest. But it is not my responsibility to do the work for you, because that helps me, not you.
Okay,
Gotcha.
that's what's up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Quick question. So, what are some of the criticisms you face as far as your profession?
Oh, snake oil salesman.
Wow.
That's, we're just talking about feelings, right?
Right.
And feelings are a big part of it, but I think people don't really understand what feelings are and what they're not, and the limitations of feelings. And we all, at the end of the day, want to feel something, right? A great comedian makes you feel. A good comedian makes you think. A great comedian or a phenomenal comedian makes you do both.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, we want to feel something. Now, if we want to feel something without understanding how those feelings actually drive our lives, then we'll only seek the feeling, and the feeling won't have context, and then I'll always chase the feeling without understanding why this feeling is necessary. Right? So like, for example, happiness, for example. Some people are like, I just want to be happy. I'm like, and? What do you want to do with it? Is that happiness going to help you have more discernment in relationships? Is it going to motivate you to find a better job? Is it going to actually make you call that cousin or aunt, that you haven't spoken to in a while, that you want to build a better relationship with? Because ultimately, feeling happy doesn't really mean anything.
It's just a feeling.
It's just a feeling. Yeah. Like if my girl says, you do these things, you make me happy, and I do all those things and she ain't happy, did I fail? No. Because that was about her anyway. So it's really about understanding what feelings are. And as a therapist, my job is to help them think beyond. My job is to teach people how to think, not what to think. Okay. So, but if you want to be told what to think, which a lot of people going back to the myths that you had, or that you're speaking of, that's what they're doing. Well, you didn't tell me what to think, just tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do, because if you fail, you're going to blame me. And you just reappropriate. And now what you're doing is you're using my credentials as a way of justifying why you already feel the way you feel. Couples do this all the time. They're on the brink of divorce. They come to me and say, well, hell, if he couldn't fix this, then what can? Who can? Right. And they're like, no. So and that's kind of the art of it, and really understanding that, that it takes a long time, that we enter for money, right? Like, I charge out of pocket quite a bit of money. I charge more than the average person. Why? Because I think I'm better than the average person. Yeah. But with that, you have to understand what comes with that. But I also have to deliver, right? It's about. It also keeps me honest, because if I don't do well, you're not gonna pay me.
Yeah.
So it keeps me motivated. It keeps me motivated to learn and to grow and to see metaphor and different things and be able to use analogies that best fit them, versus just telling me, well, how do you feel about that?
Right.
You know, tell me how you feel.
And I got one more question. Are there any particular studies on just basically just the black male psychology and just how he internalizes things or anything like that you know of?
Actually, no, there's really not a lot to that. There's so few of us. I don't think a lot of us are doing a lot of research about that. Actually, that'd be something that would be great for, I guess, for me to do. Yeah. You know,
man.
When there's a gap in the vacuum, you close the gap.
Well, let me say this. We're gonna wrap this up, but before we do, this needs to be said, man. We've been at it. How long have we been at it now, man?
An hour, maybe. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about total, like under construction.
2.5 hours.
About 2.5 months.
Yeah.
We've been at about 2.5 months, man. Let me say, this is under construction. Did a special thing today. I think this is the most fulfilling episode or segment that this crew has ever done, man. I really want to thank you for your time today, man. This was really dope. Going forward, man, I hope we can have more like, man. So thank you for coming on and joining us today, man.
Yeah.
And what's the name of your podcast as well?
Yeah, shout out to podcast, bro.
Close this out with where you're located, your podcast, promote yourself, do all that good stuff.
Sure. Brandon Risher, clinical psychologist and owner of Risher Wellness and Counseling Center. You can find me on Twitter at PLLC Risher or Instagram at Brandon.Risher. Look me up on Facebook. I'll be actually coming out with a show with the project on YouTube, so y'all can look out for that. And I'll continue to do speaking engagements on microaggressions and racism, and just try to do my part to help not just my people, but how to integrate my people into the greater society at large. So, and just the last thing I'll say is thank you all for this vehicle to be able to do this. This is great. I think the questions were amazing and really relevant, and I hope that we can evoke some change in the city.
Yeah, man. Right. Hopefully this ain't the first and only time, man.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm always back to talk as a Laker fan.
Appreciate you coming on, bro. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man. And
peace out, y'all.
Thank you guys for watching. Under Construction.